All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Yay! Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, and fellow lovers of literature, it is my distinct privilege to welcome you to the Rancho Mirage Library and Observatory, the Rancho Mirage Writers Series. My name is Aaron Espinoza, and I get to be the director of both of those entities, so I have the best job in the world. Before we embark on this literary journey, I'm going to kindly ask that you silence your cell phones. And I'm going to do it the second time, because last time we asked, everybody said, oh yeah, I did it, and then immediately we got that phone call. So today, I'd like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to our visionary founder of the Rancho Mirage Writers Festival, Jamie Kabler. Jamie's dedication to our community, his generous support, his spirit have paved the way for our writer series. He has enabled us to give out, just in the months of March and April, over 1,200 copies of our authors' books. I'd also like to express our deep appreciation for Jordan Snitcher, whose generous support, funded by the Harold and Arlene Snitcher Care Foundation, has made the Rancho Mirage Writer Series possible. Without his unwavering support and commitment to education and the arts, our endeavors would not be possible. So please give a round of applause for Jordan. So I'd also like to make a mention of a few distinguished guests. We have two members, founding member of Pink Martini, Thomas Lauderdale. And also of Pink Martini, Hunter. Thank you, Hunter and Thomas, for being here. So as we look forward to our upcoming programs, we have an array of esteemed authors ready to share their insights and stories with us. March 21st, which is next week, we're honored to host Shannon. Neil King Jr.'s discussion on his captivating book, American Ramble. Also mark your calendars. This is a change from any printed materials that we have had. On Thursday, April 11th, we're going to welcome back Julia Whalen, the Adele of audiobooks, speaking on her book, Thank You for Listening. And finally, we have the privilege of concluding our writer series on Thursday, April 25th. Just a quick nod, that's my mom's birthday. So, with none other than Valerie Bertinelli talking about her newest gem, Indulge, which is also a cookbook. So before we proceed, allow me to introduce today's esteemed guest, author Steven Rowley. Steven is a best-selling author known for his remarkable works such as Lily and the Octopus, The Editor, and The Guncle, and his latest release, The Celebrants, published in May of 2023. His contributions to the literature have garnered acclaimed prestigious acclaimed awards from the Washington Post, NPR, Esquire magazine, and beyond. Joining Steven on stage today is the distinguished Scott Nevins, a proud resident of Palm Springs, renowned healthcare civil rights activist, and an LGBTQ+ advocate, a political news contributor, and a dedicated community leader. With his unwavering commitment in fighting for unrepresented groups, Scott brings a unique perspective and invaluable insights to today's discussion. Together, Steven and Scott promise to inspire, enlighten, and entertain us as we delve into the world of literature and beyond. So without further ado, please welcome Steven Rowley and Scott Nevins.
Thank you very much. All good.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Oh, I have been looking forward to this for a long time. Okay, I'm Scott. I didn't write this book. I'm not that talented. I must say, I'm going to out you for a second. As two Palm Springs residents, we are Very jealous of this space here.
Yes.
This is such a gorgeous space you have here, and this program and the Writers Festival, everything about it is spectacular. So I'm thrilled to be a part of this, and I'm thrilled that you're here with us.
Oh my God, I couldn't be more excited. This is a fantastic turnout. I can't believe it.
You're a sellout, baby. Look at this. And you had such a long journey to get here today from Palm Springs.
Well, in this storm. So oftentimes as a writer, I'm often asked if I have a favorite word. Mm-hmm. And as the author of The Guncle, I usually default to saying nibbling. I love the word nibbling, which is the gender neutral for niece or nephew. But now my new favorite word is haboob. I've just, I just sort of learned it. It's really incredible.
I said it this morning. I said, is this a haboob? And someone looked at me like I was insane. Not everyone knows that word. I learned it when I moved here from the East Coast. Yeah. That's a great word.
Yeah, so haboob is up there with nibbling.
Nibbling. Okay.
I lost my nibblings in a haboob.
Now, for those who may not know, will you give us the Reader's Digest version of sort of your history, your past, where you were born, where you come from, all that good, juicy stuff?
Sure. As happy as I am to be in the desert now, I actually grew up in Portland, Maine. So all the way on the other side of the country. Oh, Maine! Yay, Maine! Which was a really lovely place to grow up. I always had sort of writing ambitions. I remember from an early age writing short stories, and my dad, who sold insurance, would bring them into his office and run off photocopies on the copy and bring them home for family, for me to hand out to family and friends. And I remember thinking, like in second grade, wait a minute. There can be more than one copy of something I write. The drive to be a writer, I think, was always there. But I sort of thought, being so far away, that it was either a career that was available to you if you grew up in Manhattan or if you had a society connection. But always sort of lurking in the background in Maine was Stephen King, right?
Yes.
So, whenever my mother thinks I'm kind of a big deal, I have to remind her I'm not even the most famous writer named Stephen from Maine. So keep her in check. But I went to school at Emerson College in Boston, where I studied film. More love here for. I honestly thought I'd be a screenwriter, and for years in LA I was pursuing a career in screenwriting. But screenwriting is very different from novel writing, both in format. Screenwriting, everything has to be action, dialogue, things you can see or hear on screen. Whereas novel writing, you have access to, a character's complete internal, life. And I got tired of waiting. I lived through a first writer's strike last year, not to mention, about 15 years ago, not to mention the one we had last year, but you're always waiting for a director, financier, actors, producers, studio, it's so many hurdles to clear to get anything made. And when I had my idea for my first novel, Lily and the Octopus, I just saw it as a more, filmmaking is also very collaborative, and the writer is sometimes very low on the totem pole. And so I just saw it, as such a specific way that I wanted a more sort of authorial voice over telling the story. And so I tried it as a novel, and sure enough, that paid off.
So what you're saying is you don't like working with others.
Exactly.
Yeah, all right. We got it.
My sandbox, everybody else get it. No, I'm very lucky now to be able to, that some of my books are in development as in movies and TV, and I love having that to balance. I love, because novel writing can be very solitary. And so I like balancing that with the collaborative nature of it.
Let's rewind a second. Some of the books are in development for movies and TV. Did that slip out by accident, or are we allowed to know
No,
that?
You're allowed to know that. It's a painstakingly slow process, so we'll see. Where we go. But fingers crossed that with the strike settled, that we're on our way.
Wonderful.
We need no more pandemics, no more strikes, and no more haboobs.
Cheers to that.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so obviously, we're all here because we're fans. I brought my own copy of The Guncle for him to sign. I am a fan. But I wanted to focus today on this fantastic book that you have here, The Celebrants. And I'm going to ask you a very basic Betty question, and I mean this sincerely. How the hell did you get this idea? Why? Living Funerals, where did this come from?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Very early on in the pandemic, remember, we're talking 4 years ago now this week. Remember when we thought it'd be cute, we'd be home for 2 weeks, we'd watch Netflix, and then we'd see our family and friends again. And I was looking for movies that I'd seen that might be comforting, but I hadn't seen in a while. And I stumbled across the movie The Big Chill. Remember this, right? We all remember it largely for the soundtrack of Motown hits. But it's a movie about college friends who reunite after the death of one of their own. And it's about middle age and the stresses of middle age and what the back half of their lives are going to look like. And I'm watching this movie, and all the characters and all the actors in it are 35 years old. And as someone who was turning 50 that year, it was like, this is not comforting to me. This is not comforting at all. So I wanted to write about a group of college friends, but we're going to age them up to a more modern understanding of middle age. And similarly, the year before, I had lost one of my best friends from college to breast cancer. And Byron, my husband, and I, Byron, who's here, we were overseas. And, woo, Byron! Not from Maine. We were in Italy. We were on a trip in Italy when she passed, and I immediately wanted to rush back, to go to the funeral and all that. And our friends were very adamant that no, that's not what she would have wanted, And they said something that resonated with me very deeply, which is funerals are for the living. And of course, they meant, it's a ritual we have to comfort those left behind. But, my writerly brain thought, oh, well, what if they actually were for the living? So in The Celebrants, a group of college friends make a pact right before graduation upon losing one of their friends to suicide, that they, after attending his funeral, they think if he had only heard all the wonderful things said about him and the impact that he's had on their lives, maybe he would have made a different choice. So they decide, as they're about to scatter, all over the world, that at a moment's notice, each friend can reassemble them to throw their living funeral, their funeral while they're alive to attend it, and hopefully hear all the good things that were said about them and the impact they've had on others, and hopefully that would reunite a passion for living. I sort of think it's a juvenile kind of pact, but they go off on their own, and sure enough, life starts to intervene, and one by one, they reassemble for their funerals.
And have you personally participated in one of these living funerals?
No, I have not.
Well, guess why we're here today.
Oh, no. I walked right into that one. No, look, if we're going to do it, let's do a roast. Or let's really do it. Let's really do it. But there's going to be a lot of conversation between artists and writers in particular, I think, about how we address the past few years, that we've been through. And, whereas I was not ready to address it directly, the book very conveniently skips the years 2019 through 2021. I wasn't ready to go back there so deliberately, but the idea of telling the people in your lives what they mean to you now while you can, that's very much a reaction to, I think, the past couple years. Because we've all lost things. It may not be a person per se, but we've lost time, and the ability to be together. So I think this is very much in response to the past couple years we've endured.
And I think one of your
But with jokes.
Yeah, well, that leads me to my next thing. I do think one of your greatest gifts as a writer, and you have many, is this ability to take sorrowful situations but use humor and inject humor into it. And you see it in all of your books. And this one especially, you really laid on it, and it was great because it made it accessible in a way that some people do not like to talk about death. Some of us, the closer we are to it, we don't like to talk about it. But it is something that I think is such a gift of yours, and we see it. Is this something that you consciously work on when you're writing, or is that just a natural infliction that you have?
Yeah. Is that your way of saying my humor is very labored?
No.
No, but humor is such an important, for me, it's always been the way through, right? And I think that's true for the queer community in particular. I think about when I came out in 1990, 91, we were losing more people to AIDS in the early 90s than even in the 1980s. So, and I think about the literature that was available to me when I was trying to think about what life might be like as a gay person. These were stories that were often about lives lived in the shadows, lonely existences, and often lives cut short. And so, I'm very conscious now in crafting stories to always include the joy in life, because I found the opposite to be true. I've been very lucky. It's partly, the time in which I was born, but, a decade difference, I might not be here, but life fortunately has been filled with community and found family and joyous and relatively long. Although, as you say, time goes by quicker and quicker. But I always want to put that joy and the ability to laugh. I think that's how we've survived so much.
Yeah, we discussed this on the phone briefly, but the idea that as a community, we lost an entire generation of father figures. And to get through that, humor and performance. And I see that so heavily injected in your books. And it's really, it's sort of these uplifting moments that sort of take you out and it's going to be okay is sort of the message underneath it all.
Yeah, I think so.
And do you find that that's true in your life as well, that you're always looking to the funnier punchline, the funnier side?
Is that true, do you think?
Yes.
Yes, we've got one yes vote down front. Yeah, I think so, and it's sometimes too much. Sometimes I'm chasing the joke too much, or we're in competition for like what's the biggest arguments we get, because Byron is also, my husband's also a writer, and
a fantastic writer.
Fantastic. The biggest arguments we'll get into sometimes if we're leaving a dinner party, and God help you if any of you are related to or friends with writers, because we are sponges. We do steal. And so like if we overhear something at a dinner party, and we'll get in the car on the drive home, close the door, and be like, "That's mine," and then it's a race to see who can use it first. But sometimes like you're chasing a joke too much, and I think the important balance of what I try to do as a writer is, I hate to say it, but humor can be very serious business sometimes, and so it is almost surgical. Like I'll go line by line. Sometimes a scene you put in one joke too many, and it takes the air out of what you're trying to do.
Yep.
And conversely, if you go too long without giving the reader the opportunity to take a breath, with a joke, or with a laugh, then it could color your work in the other direction as well.
It is. It's an exact science. When I did comedy for years, and you could change one word in an entire story, and it will kill the joke. And it is so fascinating because you nail it every time. Every time I laugh, I get the joy. It all comes pouring out of it, and it's so wonderful because a lot of authors try a little too hard and miss, and you hit the home run, and I like it. I also love that you use like a non-linear timeline, and this is something we've seen a few times from you as well. Is this purposeful?
Yeah, I think so. Particularly my book, I think it really started with The Guncle, and that book, it's about an uncle living a semi-reclusive life here in Palm Springs, or next door in Palm Springs. Who inherits his niece and nephew for the summer after the death of their mother. Not a lot of moments in that. I always think about the entry point to my story, because I do want to promise the reader that, trust me on this, even though the setup may be dark, we're going to have a little fun too. And in that sense, it was like I had to start partway through the story to start with some humor. And then backtrack too. Otherwise, it's like, I could lose people before the story even begins. Yeah.
Have you gotten any pushback's not the right word, but sort of any reactions to the book that shocked you, both good and bad, from people who read it and had very strong reactions and opinions?
Readers always have strong reactions and opinions, and if you're on Goodreads, they're not afraid to share them. But no, it's been overwhelmingly positive. In fact, I was just at the Tucson Book Festival this weekend, and a reader came up to me hugging this book and said that she had just gone through chemotherapy and had to miss half of her book club meetings last year. And the book club read this while she was going through treatment. And their first meeting back, they decided to sort of throw her living funeral, like to use the book club to say how much she was missed and what an essential part of the club that she was, and that had touched her very deeply. And in turn, like, I'm so grateful when people are able to share things like that with me.
That's beautiful. I love that.
If you have other opinions, you just put them on Goodreads. You don't need to share them with me personally. Yeah.
It is shocking how people feel after a show, after a book launch, to just tell you how they feel if they didn't like it. It comes right out.
Yeah, but it's a yes, absolutely. It's a double-edged sword though, because truly, like, I love engaging. I'm very active on Instagram. I had to leave Twitter, for my own mental health. But I love having that interaction with readers. One, because, as I mentioned, writing can be a very solitary endeavor. reading is also something we usually do by ourselves. But if you think about all the other people who are out there also reading the same book, there is a great community aspect, about communal aspect to reading. And it can look at all the people it can bring together. So to be able to, feel part of that community, engage both ways. And I also love when I get to talk to students and to classrooms in school, because I think back to the story I told you too. Like, I always wanted to be a writer. If I'd known I could have had access to talk to a writer and be like, oh, no, there's a way in for everyone, and everyone has an important story. That could have done so much for my life. I might have published before I was 40 years old, yeah.
But that's part of the great thing about your story, though, is that you did this in your 40s and that you started this sort of, we won't call it a new career, but a new avenue of your career. Yeah. And it's exploded for you. It's been incredible. And do you hear from a lot of young writers? Do you have people who reach out and say, and we can preface young by, 35
younger
and
than
younger.
Me, yeah.
Yeah.
Big chill age, yeah.
Yeah. That movie was so influential on this. I made the connection, then forgot, and as I was doing my research for this, I was like, that's right, The Big Chill. Yeah. I may need to go back, and we may need to get together and watch that in like a week or so if you're all available.
All right, forget books.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're having a movie club. Oh no, the look I got from Jamie here.
No, books. No, but thank God for Jamie and Debbie and everyone here. I mean, I do worry, like, this gives me so much hope. I worry about the next generations of readers, and I have a godson who is obsessed with reading, and that I could not have been happier. He could be a serial killer. I'm like, that's fine, he's still reading.
Yeah.
I worry that with screens and everything so accessible like that I worry that we're losing some of the art form. It won't go away, but it worries me.
It does worry, but every time there's, it's cyclical in a way. Every time we think people are moving away from reading, they come back. Or with the advent of ebooks, and Kindles, everyone thought the printed book is dead, but no, the printed book is stronger than ever. And so things are cyclical, and there's all sorts of great ways to read. Audiobooks are very popular now too, and that is absolutely a legitimate way to read and consume books. But I do hope, as you say, because it's not just that they're reading for pleasure or for education or whatnot, but reading I think it fosters so much empathy for other lives that are different from our own. And that is so important right now. As we seem to live in a political culture that is determined to other everyone, it is, important to know and to feel someone else's journey, and that we're all human.
I'm going to step into that for 1 second, and we'll step right out. Are any of your books banned anywhere?
No, but I just signed a deal to write my first children's book, so I'm wading into those.
Yeah.
Those waters. No,
book release in Florida.
Who has a copy of? Does anybody have a copy of the Gunkel here? Or can people picture that cover? Right. Yeah. It's Patrick, the main character. It's in the back of the room, in a caftan, and the kids are sort of following. Yep. So a man ostensibly in a dress, it's a caftan, but a dress, and leading children into a life of, God knows what, in people's imagination. But it's always people who haven't read the book, because I think the book is filled with kindness, But it's people who haven't read the book who have come at me in a very strong, with very strong and cruel accusations. But yeah, so it's
really
sure.
Wow. Yeah. Shocking.
Yeah.
That just makes me want
one reason to leave Twitter.
Yeah. One of many, by the way.
Yeah.
Yes. Instagram's fun. You have a photo, and then you have a little caption, and you're done. It's much easier. Yeah. Who were some of you, I want to go back again, sorry. Who were some of your inspirations as authors? Who really inspired you?
Oh my God, you're going to put me on the spot. Byron Lane.
Well,
one of my favorite
We'll go back
authors.
to this. Let's talk about Byron for 1 second,
Sure.
okay? So your husband has written several books, but one that I love and obsessed with. He was Carrie Fisher's personal assistant. And he wrote a brilliant book called A Star is Bored. So really, I'm bringing this up, not just because he's brilliant, because I have a very juicy question. So 2 writers married. I remember an episode of Sex and the City where Carrie Fisher was dating another writer, and he let her read her book, and she had one note about a scrunchie.
Yeah.
And it ruined their relationship. Have you ever shared stuff and you're like, just if you don't like it, don't say anything? Like, is there an open exchange that you guys have?
I think we've gotten very good about navigating that. I know I have other writer friends who assume being married to another writer would be an absolute nightmare. But it works for us, and I can say, like, a good thing about our house is that it's quiet. You know, it's conducive. It's conducive to working.
Separate sides of the house?
Separate sides of the house. We'll meet sometimes at lunch. How's your day going? How's your day going? Good. Bye. Separate sides of the house. We have 2 rescue dogs who can choose their loyalties. Raindrop and Shirley, if you follow us on Instagram. Yeah, I think we've got the hardest part is about giving each other notes, and so like if Byron's giving me notes, it's tough on you. I think he has to decide if is he wearing his hat, his spousal hat, in which case, he just wants to cheer me on and go, continue. Or, am I asking him as another writer or with an editorial eye? We've got to figure that out. It doesn't work when I try to punch up his jokes. That never works.
Yeah. My husband's a hedge fund manager, and I can't do math, so we just keep it separated. Yeah. We get along great. Yeah. So
that probably comes with insurance, though. That was smart.
He's very funny. We had a funny phone call yesterday, and of course, we were supposed to talk seriously about this program today, and the first thing out of my mouth, what are you wearing?
Yeah.
2 gay guys hosting a talk back. Yeah, what are you wearing?
Yeah, well, we just want to make sure we didn't show up in the same Mr. Turk.
Yes.
But, yeah.
It could have been a bitch stole my look moment. We weren't going to do it. So the characters in this book, I love, and just are they based loosely on real people? Are they all created? Why were they developed the way they were developed?
Yeah, I mean, I have a close-knit group of college friends, so it was definitely inspired by the dynamic, and I'm grateful that they are my best friends to this day. But no, there's no one-to-one correlation with the hardest part about creating a book like this is not only are there different characters, but the friendship itself takes on, is almost a character, the group dynamic. And so to create these diverse friends, but also the relationship that they have with each other, and then to draw the reader in, and make them feel part of this friendship group, and give them, inside jokes that don't exclude, anyone who's sort of peering in on these people. That was always the real challenge, but it was almost like casting a movie. I created sort of like portraits of 10 or 12 different characters and was like mixing and matching and finding out like, oh, what would draw these people together? How would they be friends? And some of them just didn't make the cut.
And as a quick experiment, which character do you think is the most relatable when you read the book?
Oh, goodness. She's sort of the toughest cookie, but I really relate to Naomi, who is a Japanese American woman, but she doesn't suffer fools, and I just love. She was the most fun to write in a way because it's like sort of thinking about like, oh, if you have friends of 30, 40 years or something, you don't say like, oh, I'm mad at you today. It's like I'm gonna effing kill you. Is how you because you can be not the best version of yourself with these lifelong friends. It's okay to let your guard down and be a little bit messy or a little bit raw and stuff like that. And that was always the fun part to write. And
when you're writing, do you get attached to certain characters more than the other? Do you have certain affection for some?
I think there's enough of me in each character that I can find my sympathy for them, and I have to create flawed characters, otherwise there's no drama. But so sometimes you get frustrated with those flaws, but I always understand it, and so it's sort of my job to drop myself into that character and really just shut the rest of the world out and focus on making them the most authentic version of themselves. And how would they truly behave in this moment, or react, or make a mistake, or apologize.
And why 2 Jordans?
So there's 5 characters. 2 of them are named Jordan, which I just wanted to do to frustrate all of you. No, I mean, in part it comes from growing up, as a Steve or Steven, that was one of the most popular. There was always 4 in my kindergarten class, and it's like, yeah, so I'm Steve R, and there's Steve L, and there's Steve, But also, when I came out, you start to meet, like, I know a couple, the Davids, they're both Davids. I was like, that was always my worst nightmare. Yep. Like, oh God, what if I met another Steve? And like, should we invite the Steves? No, I don't like the Steves. Thank God I met a Byron. But
is that is that worse than when they morph into each other when they become identical twins? Have you ever seen that happen?
Oh, I've definitely seen that.
That's my favorite.
Yeah.
You don't get that with straight couples, right? Like you really like sometimes they wear the same color, like okay, but when gay couples they morph into one person and then you call them the wrong name. Like it's very difficult.
I know we're in a library, so I'm going to try to watch my language, but I've called those couples doppelbangers.
This is why you're a writer. Look at that. Wait, that's a great title for the next book.
Yeah, actually that is. No one take that. That's mine.
I almost called it. Will you do me a favor? We were at lunch, but we had a beautiful lunch before this, and will you tell the story of the Thurber Prize,
oh my goodness.
The whole ceremony, and your mother? Just tell you're gonna love.
Is this being recorded?
Yeah, do not tell his mother. He's telling the story.
My mother hates when I tell this story, but I'll preface it with so yes. Last year I was fortunate enough to win the Thurber Prize for American Humor, which is thank you.
I'll interrupt you 1 second.
Yes.
Previous winners: David Sedaris, Jon Stewart, James McBride. I mean, and it's a prize for American humor.
Yeah. Very honored to win this prize, but I was one of 3 finalists, and you don't know. You go to Columbus, Ohio, which is James Thurber was born, a humorist, writer, wrote The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, amongst many, many others. And you don't know. So I was one of 3 finalists. I invited my mother to the prize ceremony, and she got off the plane, and she said, well, I've read all the finalists, and I know who's going to win. Not you. And, she was, doing what mothers, I think she wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to be too crushed or too disappointed, set expectations. But there was a cocktail event before the show that night, and so we're running around and talking to everybody, and everyone's coming up to me and be like, oh, we love your mother. Your mother's so great. We love your mother. I was like, that's because she's telling you you're going to win. But then I won, and no one could have been happier. By the way, I did wear a Mr. Turk suit that night, a Mr. Turk tuxedo that night, and all night everyone kept coming up to me and being like, "Oh my God, I wish I could wear something like that." And I was like, "Oh, it's very easy. You put one leg in one fabric tube, and the other leg in the other fabric tube." And then after the 9th or 10th time hearing that, I'm like, "I don't think this is a compliment." But Columbus, Ohio wasn't ready for Mr. Turk.
Mr. Turk.
Yeah.
What colors? Colors, plural, was it?
Imagine the kind of 1960s couch that you would put under plastic,
Perfect.
That kind of upholstery, yeah.
See, in Flushing, Queens, where I grew up, that was not the 60s, that was the 80s, the 90s.
And today, yeah.
And today, yes. Okay, so very quickly, because we talked about this on the phone, it was fascinating. The topic of grief, right? We've talked about that. We touched on it in the book, in several of your books. Was this a topic you freely spoke about in your everyday life that you were comfortable talking about? Because some people are uncomfortable. I weirdly talk about grief. I started young. My dad came from a family of 12. He was the youngest, so I went to a lot of funerals as a kid. And as a Catholic, you sit through the wake, the body is there, it's the whole thing. And it was second nature to me. And my dad passed when I was 25, and I was so much younger than all my friends. Yeah. And so now when their parents pass, I feel like it's my job to reach out and say things like, it doesn't get better, it gets different, and that's not a bad thing. Was this stuff that you faced in your life where you were sort of surrounded by moments of grief that led into this?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of think like as a Western culture, we're particularly bad at grief and grieving. And so I love, not that you have been through that, but your understanding and your being able to share that, because it's true, right? It's not a temporary condition necessarily, depending on the loss that we get over. It is something that we have to learn to live with and becomes part of the fabric of who we are. And yes, it's not the same on day one as it is 10 years down the line, but it does change who we are. And I think there's too much thoughts like, oh, sometimes we put off grieving entirely for years. We're just like, I don't have time for this. Or we think it's a very temporary condition where we need to remove ourselves. We're a burden on others if we're going through it. And I just want the conversation to be out there and open constantly, that it is, the ironic part is that it's one of the most uniting parts of the human experience, I think, right? If we're fortunate enough to love, we're probably going to lose at some point. And so I do love to talk about it. I think there's some, for me though, I've experienced loss, my share, not more. I write about grief several times, and people assume I've lost like a school bus full of people, but that's not true. But some of it's anticipatory grief as we age and we start thinking about loss more and our own time here. But I also like to talk about different types of relationships. So my first book, Lily and the Octopus, was about a man losing, his dog. And, I always had dogs growing up. I grew up on a farm in Maine, as I said. So the dogs were like, they were truly pets. They lived they slept in the barn. But now, like our dogs are, God, they're spoiled. But they're full-fledged family members, and I think that's true for a lot of people. But we have brought them into our families so quickly, but we haven't really evolved the conversation about how we grieve them, and losing them is can be particularly hard. Harder than some human losses at sometimes, depending on your life. And so it was important to explore that, I think. And here, friendship grief. That for many people, losing a best friend of decades and decades is more traumatic than losing a spouse, or it's different for everybody. And the unique thing about friends at my age, I have friends who are 25 years younger, and I have friends who are 25 years older easily. And there's no deal with friends. Parents we expect to predecease us, but friends, there's no deal. And so losing a friend can be often very surprising and traumatic.
And I know you said you and correct me if I'm wrong, you have not been to a living funeral, but what is the strangest celebration of life that you've attended?
Oh, God. I don't know. I'll have to think of it. Do you have something in mind for that?
I'm not for you. Well, I'll tell. No, mine is, so my Aunt Grace. So this was going to tie into my next question. Yeah. I know that you and I both share a love of the book, the movie, and the musical of Auntie Mame and Mame. And these powerful women in our lives that leave a huge impression. And mine was my Aunt Grace. And when she passed away, I threw her a big party. That's what she wanted. And it was the best damn party, and people had a ball, and everyone kept saying she would have loved this. Everyone says that. It's like, well, why didn't we do it when she was here? And that's the point of the book, right? It's like, why didn't we do it?
Yeah.
And then I took her ashes all over the world and have spread them, sometimes illegally, in places, Disney World.
Which
put
ride
in a flower bed. It's okay. Disney World. It's okay.
Picturing it's a small world, just carrying an open urn. People, look out, Dutch children. Yeah.
The most popular rides people do it on It's a Small World and Pirates of the Caribbean. Don't know why I know that, but I also was lucky enough to be on a TV show on Bravo, and they sent us on another TV show called Below Deck, where you go on a yacht for the weekend and they film you. And I spread her ashes off the yacht, and I got more messages on social media about that than anything I've ever done in my career. And it is shocking how people want to talk about celebrating life, not just grief, celebrating life, which is what I think this comes back to, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And it's about doing the saying while you're here in front of them. Mm-hmm. And it's a powerful thing. We're going to have a few minutes to talk if you guys have any questions. But I do want to say there's, first of all, this has gone so quickly, and I love chatting with you. I could do this for hours.
There's an enormous, it's a big clock right here. I'm afraid it feels like we're going to be launched into the air when it hits. When the countdown hits 0 or something.
It's not a clock, though. It's a countdown clock. So it's what happens to us?
I mean, I know there's an observatory here, but does the Rancho Mirage Library have its own space program? Yeah.
We send books to space. But no, I am genuinely such a fan. I was thrilled to fill in to do this. And your books bring so much joy. Especially now after the pandemic, and I did notice that you skipped those years in the book, and you answered my question before I asked it. I think we're all looking and searching for joy. We have lost time. We have lost people, as you said. Mm-hmm. And I think we're all searching for something that brings us back and reminds us. And this book did it for me. The friendships. I reached out to friends after reading this that I maybe have been lazy and negligent with. And I got the sassy, well, there she is, But, it really is a testament to you. You're a brilliant writer, but the way you infuse humor and joy even in some of the darkest moments in your book, I think is the key to it. And I am so thrilled that we could gather here today to celebrate you and this new book and all of your books, because you are quite a gift to all of us. And I speak for all of us when I say thank you for what you do.
Thank you all. Thank you. That truly means so much. And if anyone read this book and were so inspired to reach out to a friend in their life, or someone they may have lost touch with or whatnot, or someone, even the friends we see every day, sometimes we don't tell them how valuable they are to us. If you read this book and wanted to reach out in that way, I think that's the best legacy for this book. And I just want to say, someone had asked me a question, is there someone, you wrote this book and you wanted to reach out to? And I'm just going to kiss up to libraries for a second. And the answer that came to my mind, and I don't think she's with us any longer, but the children's librarian at my hometown library in South Portland, Maine, her name was Mrs. Brado, and I had parents who got me a public library card and encouraged me to use it, and that is why I can be where I am today. And the first time I can remember, the first time I walked through the doors of the children's room at that library, and this woman sort of took me under her wing, and I was that kid who wanted to check out a stack of books like taller than he was. And and parents who had to promise they would bring me back next week, it's okay. She was someone who I really wished I could reach out to in that moment and be like, see what you've done. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about, right? That's the circle.
I was invited back to my hometown library, and in the children's last summer after an event for this book, and in the children's room, and the children's librarian's office, they have authors who've come and signed the back of the door, and they were like, "Will you sign the door?" And well, first I was like, I can't deface the library, But I signed that door, and it was one of the most special moments in my career.
That is amazing. I love that. Yeah. Going full circle, going home.
Yeah.
Now, anybody who knows me knows I love gossip and I love breaking news. Can we announce anything that's happening in the near future that's very exciting?
Oh, wait, do you know something? Oh, yeah. I was like, wait, do you know something?
I do know something. I'll let you say it, though.
So for those who have read The Guncle, is this where we're going?
Yes.
Yes, there's a sequel coming in May called The Guncle Abroad. We touched on our love for Auntie Mame. I particularly love, and I love Rosalind Russell and Angela Lansbury, and even a very weird movie with Lucille Ball. But I particularly love the Patrick Dennis novels from the 1950s. And Patrick, the character in The Guncle, is named Patrick as an homage to Patrick Dennis. But the sequel to his Auntie Mame book was a book called Around the World with Auntie Mame. And so I knew if I was going to revisit these characters, we'd be going abroad. So it's 5 years after the events of the original book, and the kids are now 11 and 14, and their dad is getting remarried, and they are not happy about it. And so, but it touched on, our conversation about grief a little bit too. I think, a lot of people thought, like Patrick was a really fun character to write. You must have wanted to write more of him. And yes, that's all true. But, I don't need to miss Patrick because there's a large part of me in that character, particularly our sense of humor. So, for me, my thoughts always return to those kids, because at the end of The Guncle, it's not really a spoiler, they go, at the end of the summer, they go home, and back to a house where their mom is no longer there. And so my thoughts kept returning to these kids. I need to know if they're okay. And how grief changes us over time,
I can't wait. I'm so excited for a sequel.
But also very funny again.
Are you constantly saying that after pitching a book? You're like, also funny.
I have to try. I try. I get a lot of pressure from my publisher and my agent. When I pitch a new idea, they're like, yeah, but it'll be funny, right? It'll be funny. There'll be jokes.
Remember the award.
I was thinking of James McBride, who won the Thurber Prize the year before I did. In his book, The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store, maybe my favorite book of last year, other than my husband's. And I was wondering if his agent gives him the same, spiel, like, oh, it's a Heaven and Earth grocery store? Well, what's fun? Do they sell funny things? Do funny people shop there? Does the food taste funny? But yeah, I'm always sort of promising people a good time, even though we're going to talk about some serious things.
You are naturally funny, whether you're speaking or writing, so it comes through all the time. Do we have a few minutes? No? No?
Not funny, or no, we don't have a few minutes?
Two or three, okay.
I'm looking forward to this book, but I have a question about the Guncle. Has it been optioned for a movie?
The Guncle has been optioned for a movie, for a feature film by Lionsgate. Last year, the actor strike and the writer strike slowed us down. But we're picking up steam, and I hope to have more news I can share on that very soon.
Right here.
Yes, I am a funeral celebrant for Forest Lawn, do lots and lots of funerals. But I want to thank you for Guncle Rule 16. I have used that to close more funerals and memorial services.
Wow.
Because I wish somebody would carve it in granite. And it's the concept, I want you to really, this is when the kids are going back to their dad. I want you to really live. Most people merely exist. And I have used it, and people come up afterwards, so I hope I'm selling some of your books, but it should be carved in granite somewhere in a cemetery. Thank you.
And thank you for reminding me what Rule 16 was, because there is a rule that is like, some of the other rules are silly. Like one is bottomless mimosas and pantless mimosas are not the same thing. So thank you for clarifying which rule.
And I just want to remind the audience, if you want to buy a copy of Guncle's, the other books, they're all for sale in the back of the room. Let's give a big round of applause to Steve Rowley and Scott Nevins. Thank you very much.
Jamie.
I've got the writer.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. That's so sweet.